Thank you and good evening, everybody. If we're going to discuss the global refugee crisis, we better use the EU as a case study. But we must start by asking ourselves, what is a refugee? Now, I speak as a family of refugees. We were French Protestants being burned at the stake for our political opinions, something many in Westminster would perhaps like to bring back today, I'm sure. And I come from a country that is, I think, there is no country in Europe that needs lectures about looking after refugees. The Brits have done it better than anybody else. We've done it with Jewish people. We've done it with Ugandan Asians. But what is a refugee? This 1951 convention that we've just talked about earlier. It's a person with a well-founded fear of persecution because of their race, religion, political opinions or orientation, who are outside their own country and fear returning to it. Now look, I know it's tempting to support this motion. It sounds wonderful. Give us your poor, your weak, your huddled masses, and in doing so we can perhaps feel a sense of our own moral superiority. But just look where that idea has got the EU in the course of the last year. Jean-Claude Juncker, the unelected European Commission President, who I have to say after a good lunch is rather fun to be with, particularly if I be with him actually. But Juncker has changed the definition of what a refugee is to include people who come from war-torn areas, and given that the UNHCR say there are currently 59 million people displaced in the world, that's quite a big number. But Juncker's taken it even broader. He said to qualify as a European refugee if you come from extreme poverty. And that would mean perhaps 3 billion people could possibly come to Europe. All of this, of course, was massively compounded by Chancellor Merkel, who effectively did say, give us your weak and your poor and your huddled masses, in what I think has proved to be the worst foreign policy decision in Europe since 1945. Because her moral superiority was, in my view, based on still a level of war guilt that exists in Germany. But she opened up the doors and 1 million people came in last year, but virtually none of them would qualify as refugees on any classical definition. And in fact, most of them that came were somewhat aggressive young males who, when they arrived and got through the border, punched the air and chanted, rather like football supporters. I remember as a young man watching the BBC and seeing Ugandan Asians landing on the tarmac at Heathrow, humble, thankful and promising that they would repay the debt Britain had shown them by integrating and becoming part of our society. Sadly, that is not what has happened. And there is nobody on this side of the argument trying to say that Islam is bad or all Muslims are bad. We are not saying that. But what we are saying is that if you allow a very large number of young males to come to European countries, and if they come from a culture where women are at best second-class citizens, don't be surprised to see the abominations such as that we saw outside Cologne train station on New Year's Eve. And don't be surprised that the formerly rather sleepy Swedish city of Malmö has now become the rape capital of Europe. But that is as nothing compared to what the boss of Europol said 3 weeks ago. He said there are now 5,000 jihadi fighters, every one of them potentially a terrorist, that have got back into Europe through the Greek islands posing as migrants. When ISIS say they will use the migrant routes to destroy the civilization of Europe, I suggest we start to take them seriously. And the difference between what is going on now and any other either migratory wave or refugee wave in the history of mankind that I can see is that never before have we had a fifth column, albeit a small one, thank God, but a fifth column living within our communities that hates us. wants to kill us and wants to overturn our complete way of life. I believe that we in the West should give people refugee status, and throughout this whole tragedy of what has gone on in the Middle East and North Africa, not one person in serious level of politics has dared to speak up for the Christians in Iraq and the Christians in Syria, who are now only 10% of what they were just a few years ago. They qualify for refugee status because they're being persecuted for who they are. We have to oppose this motion. This motion, at best, is impractical and at worst poses a threat to our entire way of life. I want us to have a proper processing mechanism. I want us to do all the things we've done, as Brits particularly over centuries. I want us to welcome genuine refugees, not the disaster that is engulfing much of Europe today. Thank you.